This past season has been really strong, at least for me. But out of all the many amazing shows, Idolmaster Cinderella Girls U149 just hit different. There could be some bias, considering I love idol shows, and Idolmaster in general, but I think I can confidently say that U149 is pretty damn good. And you know what? I'll say it's my favorite show of spring 2023. And this is despite the show having come out of left field for me. I didn't expect to like a spin-off, but U149 presented a show with great thematic cohesion, great direction to aid in that, and yeah, the characters are wholesome as all hell. Specific characters will be used for examples to show this off, but even if I'm going over particular episodes, I'll try my best to keep it as general as possible, in case you were just wondering about the show. U149 takes on similar fretting from previous Idolmaster seasons, where each episode focuses on different members of the cast, all of who are part of the same idol group. We're shown a gradual development of that group as a whole, leading to things like concerts. It's basically a slice of life that just so happens to be about developing an idol group. And within U149's character-centric episodes, there were similarities in theme. The one I want to talk about is this idea of capability, of the idols being capable, but also fearful, unable, or insecure in being themselves. We see this in 3 characters, Miria, Momoka, and Chie. The beauty of spreading similarity across characters is that we can see a single concept expanded and applied in different ways to accommodate for who the character is. Miria's episode is different from Momoka's, who is different from Chie's, and each of them brings a unique personality to the table. Miria's episode is about the gang shadowing an older idol whose forte is in the dubious dark arts of streaming. In other words, the producer is taking the class out on a field trip, and this technically counts as work and learning experience for the goblins. Eventually, we end up in a situation where Miria asks for an explanation on streaming, and of course, Heart sets up her laptop, plugs everything in, and has OBS running. Through a very hilariously exaggerated mouse click, Miria's streaming career starts. She's promptly thrown for a loop, but takes it like a champ, and does a pretty good job managing stream chat. But stream chat, aptly mirroring real life, ends up harassing her. There's this really succinct pan out as the music cuts to a tenser track. The strings and percussive sounds building this sense of foreboding danger. When we get more shots of Miria, we're shown the back of her head. Her eyes and face are obscured. We're not shown how she's feeling, and this adds to the idea that she may be hiding something, perhaps her fear. It's a bit uncomfortable, and even unsettling, to go from the cheerful Miria to her being framed in such a tense and strained way, but it mirrors how she might be feeling in that moment. It's a very scary thing to just be thrown to the wolves. The twist is that she uses an even happier face to counteract this, cutting right into the music as well. The way this is built up, with the prior directing of making sure we don't see her face as things go down, is a really great way to mirror how Miria decides to navigate this. Just like how we don't see her fears, everyone around her is unable to really read how Miria is feeling. That is until Miria herself decides to give us something to work with. Despite being afraid of the situation, Miria presses on, and the directing helps emphasize how she gets over her fears. When the squad puts up signs to cheer her on, we get similar framing of the back of Miria's head, but the context shifts. It's not a tense moment where she's holding back, but we see Miria bringing herself into frame and expressing her love for idols. The fear she has is lessened as she takes agency in how she'll act, hence she pushes herself into the forefront of the camera, occupying the shots more actively again. This relates back to how Miria is in control of the situation, and how she's taken things into her hands after being berated and realizing that she has to put on this face to make sure things go smoothly. It isn't until the very end that she admits she was terrified. But despite being scared, she still smiled and did her job. Because as an idol, that's her modus operandi, to make others smile. She didn't quite feel capable of being able to stream and be herself for a moment, but she put on a facade anyway, and once she saw everyone encouraging her, she was able to be herself. This episode shows this theme through a lens of camaraderie. Miria, despite being insecure and fearful of the situation about whether she could be herself, found that she could. And the directing really helped push that along, giving us hints and building up this potential fear she had held and showing how she overcomes this through her friends, but also through her own action. Directly after this is Momoka's episode, where we get a very similar through line. Essentially, Momoka is brought onto a reality TV show. Throughout the shoot, Momoka, who is a VIP because she's the daughter of the group sponsoring the program, is forced to put on a mask and can't be herself. Being herself might not make for good TV, but it might also put those around them in an awkward situation where they've built up an image for her. Throughout most of the episode, we see her playing up this given role. It's a bit like Miria, in the way of having to pretend and act like things are okay. The first instance is with the water bottle scene, where we see her taking peeks at it, and there's specific close-up shots of the water bottle, giving particular importance and emphasizing how hot it is outside, and why it's important to see Momoka having to settle with steaming tea. Having shots where Arisu is aware of this and catching onto Momoka's facade is another important way for the audience to also be clued in to Momoka putting on a face despite how she may be feeling. Momoka even acknowledges this, where she feels the need to act a certain way to accommodate for everything. Again, going against what she may want and who she is, which Arisu questions. The person who's been keeping a keen eye throughout. The consistency here in how we're shown Arisu's awareness, all leading into her questioning, is great. Where this all comes to a head is at the very end. All of this pretending culminates when she's asked to bungee jump, and we get a very visceral scene of her hesitating.
Sakurai-san? Momoka-chan? Hi!
From the way the camera shifts to a fisheye lens, giving a sense of disorientation, but also representing Momoka's uneasiness. To the sound design, increasing tension as the creaking of the platform joins, the music cuts in at just the right times to punctuate these moments, and the slow peer-over accompanied by a shot of her back shaking as producer and Arisu watch. The scene in sequence focuses a lot on showcasing Momoka's anxiety and fear, and we don't get direct interiority. It's all laid out and told through what we see. Ultimately, she has to take a breather before finding the courage to jump, and a bit of tomfoolery with the producer sacrificing himself. She admits, like Miria at the very end, that it was incredibly scary. I think this take on the theme spins it in a different enough way, where Miria struggled through and took things head on with her courage. Momoka's story, to me, is more about being able to admit when things aren't okay and finding a way to be herself. Throughout the episode, she's been putting on this face and doesn't know whether it's okay to be herself. And being told that she can be herself helps. This theming of being unable to show herself, that she needs to play up that perfect role, even in her discontent, is poignant, and is a good spin on how we saw this idea of holding back from Miria, where now it's more of a subtle pressure and expectation that Momoka is imposing on herself. The framing and consistency of how we learn about this with the other characters and how the key moments are punctuated do a great job in honing in on that without needing to explicitly explain it through dialogue, and instead ingraining it in the subtext of the show. And to complete this trilogy of thematic fretting is Chie. Her episode starts immediately with her apprehensions and fears of capability as she's asked to do needle work to fix Nina's torn animal hood, but denies being good with that kind of work.
ちえちゃん、ニナちゃんのお洋服直してあげられませんか？え？ちえちゃん、お裁縫上手ですから。そんな、ちえなんか。
There are a few shots early on where we get Chie, but the camera obscures her. Characters moving in her place or positioned below her face, hiding how she feels and highlighting her insecurities. They eventually end up going to another idol's fashion show since they're looking for models, except an accident happens where the dresses are ruined. But before this, when they look at the dresses, the directing punctuates again the underlying sense of insecurity that Chie has, like the way the camera continues to block off her eyes, giving her a chance to hide, and we see her through mirrors. The mirror is almost acting like a conduit for her character to speak.
可愛い衣装だな。
はい。ちえにはもったいないぐらい。
And to a degree, her speaking through the mirror is also able to reflect the things in her mind. Like how she mutters, how she feels like she isn't cute enough to wear dresses. It's told through this reflection rather than us hearing that from her directly. There's a sense of distance Chie is taking that the mirror affords. Since Chie can actually sew, she is able to save the day, but she doesn't yet have the courage to offer that help. Even as the others chime in, she denies it.
ちえちゃん、お直しできませんか？ちえちゃん、お裁縫すっごく上手なんだよ。そんな、ちえ。
And we get more shots of her face being obscured and cut off. Her voice and true feelings being literally cut off. She's unable to express herself. There's this poignancy of how she's afraid. But as she learns that everyone around him is a bit shaken up and still pushing ahead, she gains encouragement. The shots up to this point have been tainted in a darker tone with Chie, but as she understands what everyone is going through, she steps out of that darkness, and the lighting and positioning of her stepping out into the light marks that transition in her mind, where she is now stepping away from her fears. We even get another mirror shot placated in a dim gray as she hesitates, but this isn't like her previous self. This time, she's found inner strength, and she overcomes her insecurities by reaching out. And the shot beams in camera flares, giving flickers of light as Chie is ready to move forward. The distance she's gained from using this mirror prior is now bridged by her own action. It's a really beautiful moment to see her inner self go from self-doubt to reaching out and taking this step forward. This same idea carries over during the last moments where she's in the darkness behind the stage, and while she is speaking, the camera pans upwards towards her eyes, reinforcing the resolution and strength she's found. She's no longer hiding, and so the camera work doesn't need to hide her, instead focusing on her and the changes she's gone through. The same idea of being unsure of oneself is told through Chie, but this time it's in a more private way, where she has to tackle her fears and insecurities and realizes through other people that being scared is something that everyone goes through. The show manages to convey a lot of this interiority just through the careful lighted shots, where the camera and framing of the characters shows how they're feeling and relay that without needing Chie to ever explain. I think the way these characters are able to focus on a central idea of having these fears and overcome them in their own varied way is really meaningful. All of them, even at their age, are valid in their fears, uncertainties, and insecurities that they may feel, but none of them let that stop them from getting their goals, and they all press forward in their own unique ways. It may seem a bit silly and goofy. This is a show grounded in the reality of child idols, but the show treats them with respect and characterizes them earnestly, able to express really sweet messages. U149 is an incredibly awesome show. There are some things, sure, that I wish it could expand on, and there are minor things that I wish it would have touched on, but the amount of fun and meaning I got out of it was just so great. I didn't expect to really be empathetic to this cast, to see how they may share in these really poignant themes, and it was a treat to see the team behind it really go to town here, making sure the themes are beautifully expressed in just the visual language present, and making this cast so colorful, expressive, and enjoyable. And that was the end of the video. I admit that this video was kind of a hodgepodge of kind of a review and then the analysis, and I kind of flip-flopped while making this video, deciding what I want to do. At the end of the day, I ended up making this kind of analysis showcasing a theme that I found from the show, but mostly just gushing over how the show is able to visually represent that, and that ended up being the main kind of constraint of the video. It could have maybe use a little bit more focus and a little bit more honing down, sure, but I already had most of the stuff ready for it, and I just really wanted to showcase some of the characters and really go over why I think the show is really as complex as it can be, given the directing and production of it. If you want to support what I do over here, then I do have a Patreon. Otherwise, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.